Hey everyone, this is Kirbiknight doing something a little bit different. I know I'm not really someone who tends to do tier lists, but I figured it's about time I try something new. So we're going to be taking a look at the tier list of decks up to set 12 for English. We don't have set 13 out yet, so we're in a really weird place where we still don't have set 13, but we're still under ban list. And this might be a little late coming, but kind of see where we kind of are at in terms of playable decks. So I guess I kind of organized them a little bit, but I'm just going to be going through them and just sorting them on a basic tier list. All right, so starting off, MLB. MLB is actually a little bit scary, but I think it kind of does need to high roll. I haven't seen MLB do a lot since it kind of topped. So, I think I might just put it in either A or B. I think that I definitely can. I think it's maybe just low A. And we'll kind of just leave it there and push other things down. Next up, we do actually have probably what I think is one of the two top decks right now, that being Orphis Masks. This section just like has a pretty good early to mid game, and has a lot of finishing power. So I would say that's probably one of the best decks currently going into the last bit of set 12 meta. Overlord I think just hasn't gotten a lot of support, but it's still a little bit scary. 4 drive checks every single turn can definitely, if you can definitely sack your opponent out of the game, as we see in some of the matches where some of my opponents are facing off against Overlord. Shoji Doji, I kind of want to put this up a little bit higher, but unfortunately I don't think I can go any higher than C. Shoji Doji actually has a lot of insane support. Like, if you actually read some of it, it's like, what the heck? Why does Shoji Doji have such good cards? And I guess to that vein, I guess we can put Snake there too, because Snake is very similar to Shoji Doji, and it can basically use the same support since you can just copy the name. So I haven't seen anyone play Snake at all. Some people have tried experimenting with Shoji Doji, but I'm just going to leave them in C tier because I don't really think that these are good competitive decks that can go places. A deck that I think is actually being very slept on is Avangarda. So we did have our Avangarda week, and Avangarda did exceptionally well. It even has a pretty decent Gandiva matchup, so I think that Avangarda might be a little bit of a sleeper hit. It just hits really big numbers. Like, you have 2 Vanguard swings, and then you have 2 columns that are probably like 40 to 50k each, assuming you have the correct setup. But I think Avangarda definitely has a chance to do things, but I don't think a lot of people are going to be playing it, so chances are it's not going to be getting there. Next up, Gandiva. Gandiva is just honestly really hurting right now. The ban actually hurts a lot, and Gandiva is kind of just like, if you know how to play against it, like if you watch my video, for example, it's really not that scary of a deck anymore. I think that a lot of decks can just outpace it, like especially Orphis and Bastion, which we're just gonna go ahead and put in the S tier. These 2 decks absolutely shit on Gandiva because you end up with a lot of the same grade with the Shadow Army tokens, which Gandiva absolutely hates. And in Bastion, you have resist for your front 2 rear guards, which also Gandiva hates. Like, sure, you don't have as many UBDs, but you have to deal with really strong attacks every single turn. You have to deal with 4 guaranteed attacks and maybe even 4 drives. Personally, I think Gandiva is just like really low A tier. I don't know if I would put it ahead of Majesty, but it's definitely really hurting. Next up, we have Jet. Jet, I think, is still a good deck. I don't think it's quite on the same level as Bastion as Orphis, but I think it is a little bit better than Avangarda, depending on what builds you do. Because Chrono Jet, you can have order build, you can be funny and do night builds, or you can just go pure. Either way, I think Jet is still just a solid deck overall. And, if you're going to take it, you're going to do fairly well, assuming you're a good player and you get decently lucky. Next up, we have Greedon. Greedon is just surprisingly topping for some reason. I guess Vanguard Restand is just good, Vanguard Restand, who thought? I haven't actually encountered Greedon myself, but just reading the cards, it seems pretty scary, and just the fact that it has a decent amount of tops, I just like leave it here. I'm sorry, I don't have as much information on it, but I think it's a solid enough deck. Amangruzia, I think, is also just another deck that you can take, and it is pretty good. But you know, it's also another restanding Vanguard. Whoa, 3 restanding Vanguards. But I think it's definitely has a lot of potential. If you want to take this, you can probably do good. I'm not going to even mention PBO because that's not even anything. Bov is not real until she gets an arms that says your opponent can't call a sentinel. Then I don't really think it's legit. Drag Jeweled, oh, I'm sorry, buddy. Not until you get grade 4, you're not a real deck. Youthberg has surprisingly been topping in a lot of our local tournaments. I think I'm actually just gonna put it B tier. If you take Youthberg, you have a chance of winning, but I would not bet on you. Graham Grace got the new deck set and is actually doing pretty well. So I would say B, high C or low B. It can definitely do a lot of things. Persona Ride to the back row and attacking 4 times. And you can give your Vanguard an extra drive. I'll give it a little bit of a benefit of doubt. I'll give it low B tier. Minerva, definitely a good deck, but unfortunately, I think I have to put a little bit lower because it has a very high skill ceiling. Like, in order to play this deck, you have to do everything perfectly, and if you do everything perfectly, the deck will definitely reward you for your good plays. But if you don't know what you're doing, the deck can still sometimes high roll and win, like that time I got second at locals playing the deck for the first time. But I think that it's definitely possible to top with Minerva, but you have to kind of know what you're doing, especially once you get past the first couple rounds. If you don't know what you're doing, you're just going to lose to better players. Mag Mask. I have been playing and testing Mag Mask. A lot of people have been putting it in A or B tier. I do not think that Mag Mask is actually that good of a deck. I think that the biggest problem with this deck is that you have to play so many vanillas in order to make your deck function. Like, all your wrenches are like, you have a bunch of cards that are just there to CB1, make a marker, and then they do nothing else. You take up so much space with all those cards. You don't have enough space to like actually play good attackers. So I've been trying to make this deck work, but it's just kind of inconsistent. If you don't hit your second Persona Ride, well, you're not really doing very much. But if you don't have Sayrol, if you don't have your Dragon Chain markers, you don't do anything. If you don't see Sayrols, you're hitting much less powerful. If you don't see your Persona Rides, you're feeling really bad. So there's just like a lot of things going against this deck right now. I don't think that it's really that great. I know a lot of people keep saying it is, but every time I play this deck, it's just never done what I want it to do. And maybe it's just my build, but I think that maybe once we get the promo, it'll be a little bit better. But yeah, I don't think Mag Mask is very good. What I do think is kind of good is Chaos. I would say that Chaos is definitely a turn 4 deck, but when it gets to that turn 4 deck, unless you have like the perfect guarding hand, you kind of just lose there and then, because they can put like Sentinel Restrict on one of their Makanis, and their Makanis hit like 50 to 60, and you have 5 attacks. The Vanguard, I think, gets an extra critical too, but the problem with Chaos is that it has to see all its pieces, and it has to live to turn 4, which sometimes does not happen. And some decks are able to actually bulk up enough to live through that point. Speaking of decks that can bulk up, we have Willista. I'm still working on Willista, but I don't think Willista is as good as it is. If Willista didn't have the hit, I would definitely put it S tier. But with the hit, I am struggling to see Willista be that good of a deck. I think it's still definitely solid. You know, what Willista's trying to do is always going to be really good and really viable, but without like her full power, she just really has a hard time competing with these other 2 decks. They kind of are just like outpower it, and she can't really withstand that many attacks. Felt Heroes, I haven't seen this deck in forever. It can go behind Shoji Doji. Granfia, I just put Granfia here because I like him. But if you want the best, the deck with the best early game and finishers, Granfia is definitely it. But you'd really have to be able to high roll every single game if you want to win with Granfia. Basically, that's what all C tier is here. It's decks that if you grind it out hard enough and get lucky, you could probably win. But if you want to actually try to win, I would say do something in A or S and try and use that to win. But Granfia, definitely a funny card. Rosium Fairy is extremely solid. If you go get to turn 4, a lot of the times you're just dying to Granfia, so you kind of have to kill them before then, which is not that difficult considering Granfia is not very defensive at all. Claudine, I think Claudine is kind of legit. I don't think it's A tier material. I think it's just a little bit too inconsistent. The new grade 0 order that we got in set 11 makes it so that you can insanely high roll your opponent and push them to like 4 or 5 and finish them before they even get to grade 3. But if you don't hit it, if you just don't get all the right pieces, then Claudine does kind of suffer a little bit the longer the game goes on. I mean, it has triple drive, it has restand, but it's just really not there. Yeah, I think you can probably find a little bit of success with Claudine. You can probably find success with all these B tier decks, but you're probably not going to be there. Leonore, I think is another C tier deck, probably a little bit better than Felty. I played it myself. I haven't played it since set 10, but you know, it's viable. People won't expect it, but you really have to try hard if you want to win. Misty Arcs, I just put here because this is a meme. I hate this deck with a passion. You can try and fix this deck as much as you want. It will never work for you. Letitia, definitely, I think this is a little bit of a sleeper. Restanding Vanguard, being able to like get Persona Rides, bounce them to hand, and reuse them is kind of legit, but I think Letitia just kind of needs too much high roll in order to actually win. It's not really doing that much outside of restanding the Vanguard and amassing a lot of hands, so I don't know. I just don't think one Vanguard restand is enough. Like if you see like Avantgarde is a Vanguard restand, sure, but it has, you know, big columns. Minerva is a restand, but it has multi-attack. And then Greedon is just high roll Greedon, Dark States OT, you know, whatever. But Letitia, definitely not as strong, but definitely has a chance. I think that probably Michu finds herself in the same place, you know, 3 Vanguard attacks. Probably worse than Graham Grace. I haven't seen Michu do anything, but I think she is still as powerful as she was before. I think the biggest problem is she hasn't really gotten any good support. So she's kind of just lagging behind everything else that just keeps getting better. My boy Maelstrom here, couldn't do without him. He is unfortunately C tier. He's just not enough right now. He has no finisher. He has a poor early game. And no matter how many Elaines you try and cram into him, he's not going to be any better. Sorry, Maelstrom. You're still my boy, but you're not that good right now. Zorga, I think Zorga definitely goes A tier. Probably around Willista. I think that actually probably I should put it like this, because Avantgarde I do believe is pretty good, but I think that Willista and Zorga are actually just better decks. Not really a lot of people are playing Zorga because it does have a little bit of a high skill ceiling. I don't think it's as high as Minerva, but with a new mask, it is kind of just like Unga Bunga, big numbers, kill your opponent. If you don't, then you might be in a little bit of a bad place. But, you know, you can probably do that. Hexorb has not seen any play at all. I have not seen a single Hexorb in a while. I think the deck can still do what it wants to do, but unfortunately, it's just kind of too slow. If you play the old one, you have to wait until you Persona Ride. If you play the new one, you're not doing anything on your first grade 3 turn. It's just not really fast enough to still compete. Kind of sad that Aquamine had like a very small window in which it was relevant and playable. I don't know why Solarion's here. He's not relevant. Messiah, I think, is unfortunately C tier. It just does not have the same support and backing that Chronojet has. Just Bronkgate has much less powerful generics, and a lot of their generics rely on set orders. And Messiah, being the only Bronkgate deck that doesn't need set orders, means that I can't take advantage of any of those good cards. Like, you can't use Bowl Mine. Like, if you use Bowl Mine in Messiah, I think the deck would be infinitely better. Once it gets its order, maybe it's a little bit better, but I don't really think so. Thagria, this is another turn 4 deck, but unfortunately it's not as good as Chaos. I think just like Dark States generics are just carrying a lot of decks at this moment. Azel is not real. That's another deck I'm playing around with, but it's still not going very well. Pure Light, I think Pure Light has a little bit of a chance as just like the only control deck in the meta right now. We did get the Superior Rider, which is still a little bit slow because you can't use it on your first grade 3 turn. But the fact that you have access to Pure Light like 8 copies basically in the deck, means that it's just that much more consistent. The, what is it, aquamarine or whatever it is, the turquoise one, that one is a battledore, and it's also like shield value. So I think definitely probably a little bit higher than Chaos. Either high B or low A. I think I'll put her in low A, above Majesty, because I don't like Majesty. But definitely you can control the game with Pure Light. You can definitely grind games out. A lot of the decks might not care as much, like Orphis. You'll be imprisoning their orders. You'll be imprisoning their Shadow Army tokens. They don't really care about that. Bastion has resist, so you do kind of struggle against those two. But everything else, everything in A can kind of compete with Pure Light, except for this. You know, if this has to face that, this can be very dicey because you actually need your grade 0, and this is the only card in the game that can actually manipulate the soul. So other than that, like, everything in A tier can compete. Everything in B tier is feeling bad against it. And then obviously C tier is non-existent. Ava, I struggle either B or A. I think I'd put it in A just because it is viable. No, I put as no. You can go after Avantgarde. And I think I'll put this before there. Yeah, that sounds better. Ava is definitely still Ava. I mean, it was the best deck like a couple of formats ago. I think it's still strong. It did get new support, so it can kind of keep up, but at the same time, just like what Ava is doing is almost not enough anymore. Like, you can amass a huge amount of hand, you can grind, you can definitely deck people out too, and you have a lot of pressure with those Obscadades. You can clear the front row, although Obscadade, unless you're under Persona Ride, might not even be able to kill Bastion's front row. But I think it's definitely a solid deck. If you've been playing her for a while, then you could probably still play her and, you know, actually make things. Alright, so I think that's just going to do it for my tier list. I would say if you want to have the most success, take either Orphis or Bastion. I think Orphis is just a little bit better than Bastion. And if you don't want to play either of these decks, anything from A tier is probably pretty good. You can get away with something from B tier. I would stay away from C, and of course, don't really go into D. But, you know, if you play one of these, you'll probably have a good chance. I will say that this format is actually looking pretty good. Like, the power level between A and S is really not that far. I would say that, like, it's super easy to, if you're playing one of these decks and you know what you're doing, it's super easy to beat Bastion. It can be super easy to beat Orphis. If you just, like, know their weaknesses and kind of just play into them, if you just play one of these, you can definitely, like, close out games against those, and still, you know, be pretty solid. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this new kind of content video. And don't forget to do all these two things: like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.